Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Relo, the voice of the relocation industry. I am very blessed and honored to be here with Sophy King and Brendan Coggan from Envoy Global. Hi Sophy and Brendan, how are you doing today?
We're pretty good.
Doing
Thanks.
well. Still
Yeah.
Or
getting
should I
10.
say this evening? Where in the world are you today?
We're in St James's Court Taj Hotel in London. So we're in central London. Actually, some of your viewers might know this hotel because it's where the IBA was hosted in 2018. So that's where we are, in a weird little back room with funny lighting. And
We've essentially barricaded ourselves in here so that
Yeah.
nobody else comes in to interrupt our chat today. So very excited to get it done. And yes,
Well,
it's
at least you're safe.
you set it up.
That's what matters.
we're in a weird little room. Yeah.
Get into the comments. We have people checking in here on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook. We are doing a special time. This time is probably throwing everybody off. They're like, Ben, what are you doing right now? You should be, it's Martini 30. And yet here you are going live talking about the Ukraine today. We are doing a special episode of Love and Relo today where we are talking about the Ukraine and developments that are happening. We want to involve all of you out there. Hit that like button, please, and send a little love out there to the UK, our friends there, and obviously to the people in Ukraine right now who are fighting an invasion right now. So I've been riveted by what's been going on half a world away, and I wanted to talk to you smart people and see what you're hearing on the other side of the pond. What is going on from a London perspective right now? What are you hearing in Europe as this crisis unfolds?
Well, so from a London perspective, the answer is possibly different than from a European perspective. So,
Sure.
so the facts here, as I'm sure lots of people are aware, over 2 million people have now fled Ukraine. About 1 million of those have entered through the Polish border. The European member states are doing an incredible and amazing job of coming together and quickly putting in place procedures and processes and ways to deal with this mass influx of people from Ukraine. So there's a thing called temporary protection, which has been activated. The UK, though, from a London perspective, has been slower to act. So there's been questions in the House of Commons today about that, which we can give you a little bit of an update.
Why do you think there's been this kind of difference in the kind of response to this humanitarian crisis of refugees?
Well, I think there's a matter of proximity. There's a matter of also the idea of what the government wants to promulgate and has been sort of known to promulgate over the past when it comes to immigration and what that entails. But also, there's just there's the idea of what level of involvement the UK has in some of the different alliances and other sort of geopolitical considerations that are coming in, and how does that translate to some of the things that are happening with relationships with the US, relationships with other elements of the EU. So a lot of these geopolitical factors mixed in with, I think, a little bit of historical precedent that's been set in the UK for some time is coming into play, and you're seeing it. And you do have, to Sophie's earlier point, driving around on the radio, you hear people saying, why aren't we doing what the EU is doing here in London? And I think the cries are growing louder for it here in the UK, but certainly it's been a little bit, it has been a slower process. So it seems like some gears are turning. And
does it feel like the tide is turning with public opinion and that support will be more forthcoming?
Public opinion is supportive in the UK. Public opinion here is that we should let Ukrainian people come. I mean, obviously not every single person in the UK is believing, but as far as I am aware, public opinion is overwhelmingly in support of allowing more people in. Our Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has not to date shown the same attitude as that of the British people, in my opinion. Although today in the House of Commons, she said that they are opening an online visa application process for Ukrainians who are eligible to come here, which is good news, but it's not enough. It's certainly not enough compared with what the EU is doing. And I don't know, Ben, I don't know if you remember this thing happened. People called it Brexit.
It seems like a distant memory.
Yeah.
I remember wanting to do a show on Brexit a year ago, and my friends in the UK were like, "What for? This is old news." I'm like, "Yeah, but it just happened." Like, "Yeah, but we've been talking about this for years." I'm like, "Well, over here in the US, we're just now dealing with it." So yes,
Yeah.
we're a little far away from it. Yeah.
Yeah, Brexit. It was the thing that came before COVID, which was the thing that came before Ukraine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just it does seem like a series of events that oddly are creating these moments for mobility to really be on the front page of the newspaper for kind of the first time in my lifetime. It feels like where these are all global mobility issues.
Yeah.
Brexit was an interesting issue of corporate relocation and where folks, where these companies were going to relocate to. And then COVID came about, and it was a matter of work from anywhere or work from home or remote work or whatever. And these policy decisions oftentimes landed in global mobility's lap. And now we have the Ukraine with the largest migration of refugees that I can remember at any time. And this is squarely a global mobility issue. I want to welcome people who are joining us now. Hit that like button. We got a bunch of people on LinkedIn right now. I'd love to see you and hear you in the comments. Where are you coming to us from? What are you hearing where you are? I'd also like to make this an opportunity in these comments. If you've been reading any threads or posts, or if there is a particular news outlet or something that you've been reading, kind of just transfixed with, put it in the comments, link to it. This can become a repository of amazing information. So I'd love to see what you're seeing out there and hear what you're hearing. Mary Lee says, "Hello from Minnesota. My thoughts and prayers for the courageous Ukrainian people, and also a lot of thoughts to the former expats and families I know that had to flee their homes." Yes, indeed, our prayers go out to the Ukrainian people. Natalie, thanks, Ben, for always organizing these important discussions. Thank you so much, Natalie, for checking in with us. Natalie, I'd love to know what you're hearing as well, since you are kind of in the immigration space there. Mary Lee, I'd love to know what you're hearing as well. Brian Rivers, great to hear about this topic. Thank you all for this perspective. Brian, I'd love to hear what you're hearing from a U.S. perspective. What are your clients saying about how this might impact their programs and what they're doing? Jana Shazanowski coming to us from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Thanks, Sophy and Brendan, for bringing such an important topic and awareness. Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, shout out to Gabby Bachhuber for making this possible. This is some Gabby texted me last week. She's like, "We got to do something." I'm like, "You're right, Gabby." So thank you, Gabby, so much. Tim Quirk, who's guesting as our producer today. Thank you so much. Western New York is in the house. We talked a little bit about the amount of people, the sheer volume of people who are migrating right now and are fleeing the Ukraine. And now we're seeing reports of people fleeing Russia as well, as they don't support, the Putin regime and what they're doing. A large amount of people need to cross a border right now, or cross the border as a result of the crisis. What major immigration changes have occurred throughout the world in order to respond to this?
So the huge thing in the UK is the temporary protection directive. So this is
In the EU.
in the EU. So this is a thing that came about in 2001 in response to the
war in the Balkans.
The Balkans, the Yugoslav war then. And it is now being enforced for the first time, or it's coming into action for the first time. And what it means is that Ukrainian people's families, also third country nationals who live in the Ukraine and who can't return safely to their own countries, can access protection, the labour market, healthcare, education, welfare in the EU, in EU member states for an initial period of a year, extensions of 6 months, 2 years, potentially another year after that, so 3 in total, which is amazing. So it's amazing that the EU's come together. It's amazing that they unanimously supported it, and it's amazing that they're now implementing it actually really, really quite fast. And I've never seen anything like it. It's and as a lot of people pointed out, it's not what happened in response to other crises. So it did not happen in response to the Syrian refugee crisis, which is a whole other topic. Mm-hmm. But it's a massive, like from an immigration legislative point of view, it's quite a phenomenon, Yeah.
Yeah. And, just further to that point, we're seeing developments in other countries as well that are maybe to a lesser extent than what we're describing for the EU, of course. but still to help at least speed up or ease the immigration process for folks that can make it out and maybe get across, outside of continental Europe. So Canada, for instance, we've had examples even very recently of swaths of applications being filed for all kinds of different foreign nationals, but within one day, those applications that were filed by Ukrainian nationals are getting approved. So there's an expedited process going forward to make sure that folks that maybe are in need of getting that solidified status somewhere are getting that more quickly, to accommodate this humanitarian need. And then also, of course, the acronym of the day, TPS, right?
Yeah.
Here in the United States, or not, I am not here right now in the United States, but in the United States where I usually am, the implementation of TPS for Ukrainian nationals who happen to be in the country already, but maybe were otherwise expected to return to Ukraine, now not in the need, not so much in a strict sense needing to do that by going forward by virtue of that TPS status. I think one other important just consideration that comes up as the general sense of mobility when we have these millions of people crossing borders and then these countries implementing different types of processes to accommodate that on an immigration basis is that there is limited or reallocated resources on the government side to make those things happen, right? You want to accommodate these people that are fleeing and you want to make sure that they get the statuses that they need, but inherently that means that those resources need to come from somewhere else on the government side. So what you'll start to see is your regular work and residence permit applications that maybe need to be filed. They might not have as many resources to adjudicate those in the timelines that you otherwise would regularly expect. And we saw that exact thing back to the Syrian.
So I've been quite worried about that. I've been worried about how long it was going to take for applications and how the knock-on impact of that on everything, But on the other hand, well, like we're saying, we've never seen anything like this before. So this directive has never been implemented. But it's unprecedented for immigration things to happen so quickly. And the Canadian example that Brendan just gave, to see a practical example of a thing that you read in the newspaper the day before, to see that in real life, literally the next day, 20 years, that's never happened to me. So I worry that the huge influx of 2 million expected, potentially 6 to 8 million people out of Ukraine and into mostly neighboring countries is going to be huge, right? So I was reading a thing from the European Commission earlier today to prepare for this, actually, that the lovely Tanel Feldman shared, because he's amazing, and I encourage everybody to follow him if they want to understand things.
I'm sorry. Let's do that real quick. Can we add that person in the comments? What is their name? Real quick.
Tanel Feldman from Belgium. He's my man.
Can you spell that for me, Sophie?
Shall I write it in?
You can. Yeah, sure.
Now, Feldman, and he posts very many helpful things. So I was reading a thing from the EC that he posted that mentioned in it that about 300 people from Frontex and from the EU Asylum Organization are being deployed to help with registrations and that type. So there is more help coming than we saw in Syria or with the Syrian situation, but still, it's pretty unprecedented, Can
you go back? You were talking about some numbers there, and thank you so much, Gabby Bachhuber, for tagging them on LinkedIn. You were talking about numbers there. Can you go back and reiterate some of those numbers that you're hearing as far as how many refugees are fleeing that we're expecting, what kind of volumes we're looking at here?
Yeah, so far it's about 2.2 million people have left Ukraine. The UN is estimated it's going to be 8 million in total. Of that, about Poland is apparently getting 100,000 people crossing their borders every day. So every day, 100,000 people are crossing the border from Ukraine into Poland. These numbers are changing all the time. Apparently about 4/5 of those people are Ukrainian, and the rest are either European people going back home, or there are also quite a lot of Nigerian, Indian students in Ukraine who are getting out as well.
And where are they going, right? You mentioned Poland, obviously. What are the biggest destinations for these folks who are fleeing this invasion right now? Maybe if you can give me an idea of in order, or kind of like, where you see the most popular,
So they're going to Poland, they're going to Czech, Slovakia, Moldova. Moldova's a tiny country. Quite a lot of people are going to Moldova, but they're not necessarily staying there. And the other important thing is that the EU agreed to waive an article in the in the temporary protection directive that would have potentially made it less easy for member states, for EU member states, to share the burden. So it is allowed, like in short, what it means is that it's allowed for people to enter into Poland, but then carry on and end up in Germany or, you know, Spain or something. But for now, I guess because it's still pretty early days, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the idea there is it's almost like a cascading number just based on proximity at this point, right? I do think that over the course of time, people maybe have an idea of where they want to end up, but the speed at which that happens is going to be, you know, a little bit dependent on circumstances as they continue to develop. But you will see. I would be surprised if you didn't see that most people sitting in Poland, sitting in some of these other jurisdictions that are extremely close to Ukraine, for a bunch of people that have left with essentially nothing. Right, no documents, no personal belongings. Getting very far can be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
so.
I think people are joining their family and their friends, so they're going to places where they know people. The other group of people who are interesting is Belarusians and Belarusians who fled to Ukraine from Belarus in the first place, who are now leaving. But obviously Belarus and Russia are, you know, so there's a lot going on.
So they have to keep going. Like they have to kind of go on to Poland, and because they fled to Ukraine.
Yeah, so they're not going to go back to Belarus. But if somebody had, you know, asylum status or refugee status in Ukraine in the first place, if they were under international protection status in Ukraine in the first place, then they also can benefit from the temporary protected, you know, status that the Ukrainians.
This is so interesting here, and this is a glimpse into things that I frankly have not had this level of insight. So thank you for this. Put your questions in the comments. I will ask Sophie. I will ask Brendan. We will do our best to answer all of them for you. We've got one that just kind of came in here from Diane. Diane Kuto-Fouts says, "Is that provision allowed now?"
So the temporary protection. So the member states, the EU member states, are implementing it. They have to implement, but they're moving really fast, right?
They are, and I think that there's elements of things that were introduced in line with that status even before the proposal, the formal proposal, and the formal adjudicator, you know, the promulgation of the rule. So there's going to be a lot to figure out. We're seeing, right, that there's a lot that's being figured out. However, because countries did act relatively quickly on the EU side, a lot of the things that were to be formalized and rolled out in the way that the order calls for were kind of available.
Yeah.
As long as you were making your way in.
You know, so Brendan's here in London so that we can have meetings about internal company stuff, right? That's what he's here for. So we've been all day in meetings talking about all sorts of things that are nothing to do with Ukraine at all. And I thought I better just check I know what's going on before I get on this call with Ben, you know? And in that moment, in like 20 minutes before we got on the call, so I don't know if you like my LinkedIn feed, I went a bit nuts and spammed the world because I was like, oh my gosh, the UK's done this, Spain's introduced they've got an online portal as well. France has given an update about whether people with biometric passports and people without, you know, so stuff is changing all the time. And I mean, really, well, I keep saying it, but immigration doesn't usually move very fast.
Yeah.
Gabby, I know you're watching out there. Can you grab some of those posts that Sophie's been putting out there? Can you put a link to those in the comments here if people want to go find those posts that she's been putting out there? Sounds like she's got some really good stuff she's collecting there. There's further clarification here from Diane. She's asking, is that provision allowed now for travel across the EU?
Yes, it is. So Ukrainian nationals are visa waiver nationals for the Schengen area anyway. So that means that they always could, or well, not always, but they could, prior to the war, enter the Schengen area for up to 90 days without a visa anyway. There are some EU member states which are not part of the Schengen area, and for those countries, they would need visas. But basically, the short answer is yes, they can travel across the EU pretty much, I'd say.
Awesome.
The other thing I really wanted to quickly call out is I'm sort of blabbing on about how amazing it is that the immigration rules are changing so quickly and blah, 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 and the reaction has been so fast and, you know, Canada, but also I think we should just have a huge shout out to our industry. You know, I'm sure you were going to say this, Ben, but how fast and how amazing and how bloody brilliant are our colleagues all over the world who've just leapt into it. So there are so many, I mean, I get a bit
Uh-oh.
Go for it. No, this is our moment, right? I mean, this is really what our industry has been preparing for our whole lives. This is our moment for us to take action. So it is a special time.
And further to Sophie's point as well, I think, not just the responsible, this is our industry, this is the call to action there, but the level of human care that has come through, and some of the things that we talk with our teams. And I think a great example, the team that we're visiting here in the UK has been sort of on the front lines for our client base, and then anybody else that's reaching out industry wise to talk through, what should I do right now? I am sprinting in my car to the border of Ukraine and Poland, and I'm worried that my husband isn't going to be able to leave because males from 18 to 60 are being told you need to hang back. And in those circumstances, it takes an emotional toll and and an actual human response on these things. But I think that across the board in our industry, what we're seeing is that people in this industry are willing to do that and are shining in those moments. And that, I think, to Sophie's point, has been just absolutely amazing to watch, and it actually makes you feel very special and very thankful for the role that we get to play in this in this kind of scenario.
The thing is, it feels very close. So I am also conflicted about how much I'm doing this time. I mean, I'm not doing much, but how much I care about this because it's Ukraine. So my husband lived in Kiev for a year. I used to visit him there. I have friends across Eastern Europe and have done for a long time. So I feel very close to it, but people are people, right? Mm-hmm. So I cared a lot about Syria, but I didn't feel anywhere near as close personally to it. And I hope that next time, obviously I hope there isn't a next time, but I hope that our experiences in Europe of feeling so close to this one will lead us to be, and I'm not saying people weren't sympathetic or empathetic when that happened, but I think we will be even more. So I hope we will.
Well, I think there's a major opportunity. I mean, we've looked at invasions and genocides and all sorts of things like this that have occurred over the last, since the dawn of time, frankly, but the last few decades, and it does seem like this is being handled differently and treated differently, and the amount of support from across the world. And Zelensky has made a point in his talks, right, to say we are Europe. Right, we are Europeans, and I think and I think he does that to further align with Europe and to say this not only are we're Europeans, we're like you, and also if this happens to us, it could happen to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that. It's if it happens to us, it could happen to you, but also if it happens to anybody, it could happen to you. Because I don't think any of us are at all comfortable with this idea that because anybody's European, they deserve more compassion than somebody who's not European. Like, that's not cool,
Right.
But on the other hand, it's undeniable that people in Europe feel closer, not just geographically, but also emotionally to what's happening. And we have to learn from it. Yeah.
I hope we do. And I hope we show as much empathy, compassion, support for other people from other regions as well when this happens. We've got some really great, I want to honor some of the comments that are coming in here. Keep those comments coming in, keep those questions coming in. If you have links to other content that is phenomenal, put it into the comments and link to it here so we can create a bit of a repository for other, for people that want to really take a deep dive and look at different things. So if you found something interesting out about the Ukraine situation, put it in the comments and let's make this a place where people can reference things. Maria says, hi, all from Athens. I agree. There's a universal conspiracy in order for our industry to be on the front pages. It does feel like that, right? We've not had a seat at the table since I got into this business, and all of a sudden, it's our table. So it's quite interesting, but it also, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So we all have to do something and do our part. Jessica, hello from North Phoenix. Yes, we're all praying for peace and de-escalation of this war and other conflicts to be contained, for sure. Let's see. Natalie's got a question. Thank you for your question, Natalie. Have you heard of any sanctions by other countries against Russian nationals trying to get work permits for other countries, Czech Republic, Germany, etc.?
Yes. So, the ones I know of are Czech Republic has been unwilling to grant visas, so entry visas to Russian and Belarusian nationals. Greece has. So Maria should comment on this since she's here, because she's the one who told me. So Greece has also been unwilling to grant visas and permits for so-called business executives, the definition of which can be a little unclear, but may be taken to mean senior managers. golden visa routes, by which I mean citizenship by investment. So routes like that for Portugal, I think Malta, Cyprus, but certainly the UK tier 1 investor route are closed. The UK tier 1 investor route is closed for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese one's closed just to Russians, I think. But
yeah, I think that Sophie's touching on a few of the things that come through as official, right? That you hear through the wires, but we're also getting reports and seeing results of the unofficial nature of things maybe being a little bit harder for Russian nationals and Belarusian nationals, even if it's not an out there sort of promulgated rule. And so that can translate in ways that we've seen to saying, no, you can't file your visa application, or thanks for filing your visa application, you might not hear back on it, or there's been something pending even since before this crisis started, and you would have expected it to be turned around, but maybe that's not going to be the case. So remaining cognizant sort of how those relations are going, even if it's not an out and about all out rule. And granted, everybody geopolitically now is speaking the only way that they want to speak as a country when it comes to, the ways that they want to levy sanctions or do their kind of thing in terms of what that puts you up as in the, in the tiers of the space here. But, we are seeing some of those underground results take place as well for pending applications and those that want to file.
Yeah. I mean, if Ukraine goes to the top of the pile, Russia may be going to the bottom. I was talking to a good friend, Antonio Lam, who's a UK expert the other day. And
Antonio's been a friend of the show. He's been on the show. Yeah. Antonio's great.
Lovely guy. So Antonio was saying, look, I think that we're going to see increased audits for companies in the UK that are sponsoring a lot of Russian nationals or have an increased, so he was saying just be aware of that type of thing as well,
Very interesting. I find it fascinating, when we talk about the rules and then the way the rules are interpreted and enforced. It seems like there's a duality there that's the gray area where a lot of these muscles are flexed. This is very interesting. Natalie, excellent question. Keep them coming, Natalie. Also a friend of the show. Brian Rivers says, hi, Ben. Several clients with employees in Russia and Ukraine and other parts of Europe have their heads down and are working hard to provide solutions for their workforce. Some meetings that I've had upcoming have been pushed because of the ongoing war and the workload it's creating for them. Talking about top of the pile, bottom of the pile. Ukraine is top of the pile in so many ways right now. As we're talking about relocation volumes and we're talking about the general need for mobility around the world, it seems like a lot of those things have been backburnered, and the job of getting people out of Ukraine and making sure that they're safe has really become priority number one. Have you seen work return? I don't want to say return to normal, but have you seen focus been able to be shifted back to other things that have been deprioritized, or is it still very much it's all about Ukraine right now and it's all about people who are impacted by this issue, or are they starting to work on other cases that kind of were maybe paused for just a moment as they focused on the immediate need in Ukraine?
So do you know what? I've listened to a few webinars or watched a few kind of streams about Ukraine. And as you were talking, one of the things that I found extremely impressive was Ukrainian people like Marina from Abea Relocation in Kiev, or Daria, who was on Expath's webinar. Both of them said, we've been keeping on doing our jobs. We need to do our normal jobs as well. We want to carry on working. Marina was saying her staff had been into the office to get their laptops so that they could go back home and carry on working. And if they can do it, then we have to do it too.
Yeah.
So our teams are, our teams are working very hard on this, but they're doing their normal work as well. I think any company who's moving people out, they've got to do it first, but it's not the only thing they're doing.
Yeah, and just to tack on to that a little bit, I mean, to the crux of the question, I don't think that we've necessarily seen things go back towards the original set of circumstances prior to the crisis, right? No. We're still very much in the midst of all of this. And in fact, we're going to continue to be, as long as all of these rules keep changing at this rapid pace that Sophie's describing, and that, and how that impacts exactly what options we can help afford to people that we're working with and people in the industry can afford to the folks that they're working with.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Let's see. We got more comments coming in. This is wonderful. Marilee says, yes, thankful for the recent EU directive in the countries like Belgium that are quickly rolling out the process for this humanitarian crisis. This made me think, Sophie, you continue to remark on the speed with which we're seeing immigration change. And it is historically a very slow moving bureaucratic process globally.
Yeah.
Does it give you hope? And I'm always a fan of looking for silver linings in these things, right? Does it give you hope in what can be possible in the future now that we've learned to adopt a new cadence of maybe reform and change to respond to global trends?
Yes, it does. I mean, the other thing you've got to remember, this directive we're talking about, the EU one, has actually been around for over 20 years. So it's been waiting. So it's to me, it's a sign that the EU does work. It does work, and the bureaucracy that people complain about and the paperwork and those things are not necessarily good things. But this time, paperwork and bureaucracy that was put in place 21 years ago has come out shining, and I think that's a good thing. And just we all said that about COVID, didn't we? The speed with which everybody pivoted and changed, and we're kind of getting used to it, I guess.
And that's what I wanted to sort of touch on as well. The parallels in that speed and movement. I'm not sure that it started with this crisis, right? I think that there was a lot in the COVID pandemic period where governments had to move fast by virtue of restrictions for travel, or who we're going to let in, what health requirements are going to be there, all of those kinds of implementations that necessarily made travel harder and things moving around harder. But another thing that did come out of the pandemic period, and I think it was probably coming down the roads in the next 20, 30 years, was essentially the modernization and the digitization of a lot of different immigration processes, right?
True.
Visa application filings. How do we do this without meeting face-to-face or physically handing off paperwork? And that kick in the pants on that immigration side, I think, probably helps lead into what's available in this crisis for a lot of governments and moves things
and
along.
for companies also. So companies in COVID suddenly thought, gosh, I need to know where my people are.
Right.
I've got to have a report to understand where my people are, what countries they're in, and it's the same. You've got to understand instantly, who do you have who is Ukraine, and who do you have in Ukraine, where are they, how can we communicate with each other and understand exactly what's going on? So we've had a little bit of practice, getting a bit more practice.
Yeah, we've had a lot of practice over the last few years trying to figure out exactly where our people are at the drop of a dime, haven't we? In COVID and now the Ukraine. So very interesting. And then the digital tools that will emerge, I think, is also an interesting perspective as well. We've got a lot of great comments coming in right now. Hit that like button right now. That lets everybody know that we are talking here, and lets them know it's worthwhile to come on and check us out. Leave your questions for Sophy and Brendan in the comments. Jenny has done so right now. Curious as to the sentiment in the UK about the welcoming of Russian nationals. We saw the Czech Republic stop issuing visas to Russians early on, while many see Russians as victims of this crisis as well. This is very interesting, right? Villain or victim, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that are just, caught up in the situation. Could we anticipate a second wave of millions of now Russians headed to Europe? And what does that look like for the EU mobility? Lots of questions, Jenny, in here. Lots to unpack. Let's take these questions one by one. Are we seeing a change in sentiment in the UK and other places? And Brenda, if you want to comment on the US or other places, in welcoming Russian nationals.
So the UK has a lot of Russian money in it that is no longer as welcome as it was. But I would say that is about the money and about a small number of individuals. So the UK has announced sanctions on 7 Russian oligarchs today. Roman Abramovich is one of them, the owner of Chelsea Football Club.
Can you also talk about those sanctions? Because I saw that headline come out. A lot's been made about Abramovich and Chelsea and all that. Can you just go into that just for a moment? Because I find it super intriguing.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on it, but basically what I understand that to mean is that their assets are frozen and their leave to enter or remain in the UK is revoked, and various other things as well. But I'm an immigration person, not a sanctions expert, but that's basically what that is. So it means these 7 people who are deemed to have significant financial links to supporting Putin's regime in Russia are no longer welcome in the UK, and their assets are frozen. So but that's a very small number of people. There is no official ban in the UK on Russian people coming in here, although, as Brendan said, it's likely. I think it's very likely there will be delayed. I also actually think that if there were to be a massive wave of millions of Russians trying to leave Russia, I don't think that Putin would let that happen. I think he would close his borders rather than allow that to happen. Yep. But certainly we are seeing companies moving their employees out, not just their international employees, but also their Russian. So David Gilmartin was on another XPath webinar that I watched about it. He's based in Moscow, and he was talking about how he and his team have just been like night and day helping people move out of Russia. Obviously, it's presumably decimating his business as well, which specializes in people moving to Russia. So I thought,
and you keep referencing these expat webinars, and I've heard great things about them. If we can find, I'm gonna lean on Gabby or anybody out there. Let's go to the crowd here. If you can find links to these webinars or other informations published by expat, please put it in the comments. Link to it in the comments, and that'll provide that resource. You know, we talk about the potential millions of Russian folks who might be leaving the country to escape kind of this regime. It might have just become too much. This might be a bridge too far now in invading Ukraine. Do we anticipate a rush to the border there where they try to get out before Putin closes the border? I mean, do we see kind of a rush and a rapid uptick?
We are already.
Yeah, I think that started already. And, you know, what we are noticing is it essentially commenced with folks that maybe were just foreign nationals in the country needing to make their way out. But then Russian nationals starting to feel a little bit unsafe, or like the situation was precarious, especially those engaged or employed by companies that are EU-based companies or US-based companies or Canadian-based companies, where that line between you know, being safe as a Russian national at home, but also being engaged with some of these foreign powers that are creating a lot of problems for Russians at home, you know, at the moment, encouraging that type of exodus at this point now. And I think one of the challenging things to consider in that respect is, yes, a lot of people want to leave Russia, but leaving Russia is terribly difficult even without the borders being closed. With all of the sanctions and airspace restrictions and all of these kind of things, you're essentially left with going south or east with a very limited number of air carriers and a very, very limited number of places that are openly saying Russian.
I hadn't even thought of that, you know, but you're completely right? Because now we're saying there, you know, you can't fly over EU airspace, right? So what are you going in a car
so
to
you
the
got
border?
Istanbul, you got Istanbul or Dubai, or you can drive to Finland. But yeah, that's basically what you've got. But you know what's interesting from a global mobility point of view is where, if you're a company and you had operations in Russia and you were doing things in Russia which you're now not doing anymore, you're closing them, where do you set up your new Russia? You know, where's your new hub? Is it Hungary, Poland? You know,
it's Rexit. We have Rexit going on here. We've got Russian exit going on. We got Rexit. We've got firms are pulling out. I saw this. I just did a quick little search on this. Firms are pulling out of Russia. We got Caterpillar, Rio Tinto, Starbucks, Sony.
The list is growing.
Unilever, Goldman Sachs. I mean, major corporations. Ford's paused all their production over there as well. I mean, you know, so to your point, I mean, let's hazard a guess here, right? I mean, where are they going to set up?
I have no idea. No idea.
Yeah,
I really don't. I couldn't.
It's a really challenging question, and what compounds that challenge is the fact that what you're really talking about is moving these operations that are staffed by all of these Russian nationals in the first place. And you could maybe find countries to move the operations to, but what are you going to do with that workforce one way or another if we're still encountering these difficulties in actually leaving, right? So ostensibly, you'd be looking for places where the costs are similar. In places
where you could replicate the conditions, right?
Exactly.
But where is there? There's no other Russia.
It doesn't have an obvious answer at this point.
Well, and frankly, a lot of companies are there because the Russian market, they're serving the market, right? So if you're not doing business with the market anymore, exactly, right? So maybe they don't have anywhere to go, which then it's interesting when you think about how large that market is. And now if that market is all of a sudden closed, does the war for talent and the dearth of talent become a surplus, you know, kind of quickly, as now we have this enormous workforce. I mean, in the Ukraine, you know, the Ukraine workforce is huge. The Russian workforce is huge, especially in technical fields and other things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from a global talent economy when all of these folks are kind of pushed back into the mix and are looking for opportunities. We're seeing Simon Scott says there's a lot of outbound activity from Russia, but it's a very wide array of nationalities. Exactly. Interesting. So these aren't necessarily all Russian nationals. There are other nationalities. Simon goes on to say one of the major issues for Russians leaving right now is their bank accounts contain money, which is almost worthless. They have no money for deposits or first month's rent.
Yep.
I hadn't thought that sounds
right, because the ruble has been decimated.
Yeah, of course.
It's the sanctions doing what the sanctions were intended to do to an extent, but the unfortunate part is it hits the regular people, right?
Well, it hits regular people, but it hits regular people, but that's also in a way, and this is sounds terrible, but that's in a way the point of the sanction is to make it so untenable for the people that they overthrow the government.
Well, that's the thing. So I had a bit of a LinkedIn chat with Veronica and Tanel actually about the Czech Republic's, refusal to issue visas. So we were talking about that, or like chatting about that on LinkedIn, and I mean, some people were saying that this is totally unfair. It's not the Russian person on the street's fault. What did he or she do to deserve this? But on the other hand, you have to do something, and the sanctions are supposed to hit it where it hurts, and presumably the people of Russia are possibly at the forefront of being able to do something about Russia's regime and enforce it. So it's brutal, but Ukraine didn't ask for war and either, did they?
No, absolutely not. Oh, this gives me chills to think of the people that are impacted and the craziness that's going on. Marilee saying qualifications hurdle issues such as the Russian ruble devaluation affecting compensation for immigration and the Russian vaccine not being recognized. Oh, that's interesting as well. Wow. And then, of course, people are taking personal shots here. The opportunists like Bensuki is saying Chelsea should get a points deduction. Arsenal need to make the top 4 this year. Good riddance.
I think Sheffield Wednesday should move up.
That's great. That's great. Ben over here. I think the focus long-term will shift to Russian nationals and which countries they should be relocating to. What are your thoughts on this? Which are the countries most friendly to Russian nationals looking to relocate short and long term? So we talked about the countries not friendly. Where can Russians go?
Well, I hear Dubai's pretty keen. And obviously Dubai's got a very promising digital nomad visa. So you don't have to be on a local contract or a payroll in the UAE to qualify for that.
Turkey has opened itself up as a place that will also take on folks coming and potentially providing for long-term work residence authorization opportunities. So what we're seeing just in actual practice day to day is let's get these folks to the UAE, let's get these folks to Turkey, and then if there is some onward destination from there, maybe that comes up as the dust settles. But those are really the primary places that we're seeing folks head.
Yeah, super interesting. Great question there. Paz checking in here from Africa. This is great. Look at this. I think we've got all of our continents covered at this point. This is fantastic. I don't know. Do we have anyone from Asia here? Do we get an Asian representative here? We need an emissary from Asia. Great point about setting up new offices. Some general considerations may be found here. Thank you so much for linking Gabby. Shout out to Gabby, who's working hard over there, linking everyone to this great information. Jessica saying it's reported in Russian currency changes are not being allowed, so remaining funds cannot be converted for those trying to leave Russia too. Wow, you're really having to leave everything behind if you were to make that jump. Laurent says, delighted to confirm Russia has been removed from Eurovision Song Contest. Hit them where it hurts. Yeah, it's
an interesting little fact about the Eurovision Song Contest is that when I think it was when Ukraine hosted it. Ukraine hosted the Eurovision Song Contest, right? And then I think they made Europeans visa waivers to come into Ukraine. And I believe, so I might be talking, there are plenty of people watching who can correct me on this, but I always credited the Eurovision Song Contest with the whole Ukraine-EU visa waiver reciprocal arrangement. I might have made that up.
Bringing everybody together.
Eurovision, I'm a big Eurovision fan. But yeah, it's about bringing people together,
Sophie, can I make a confession here?
Yes. Have you never seen Eurovision?
I have no idea what Eurovision is.
Oh, Ben, I think you'd really like it.
Ben, if it's worth anything, Sophie looked to me as she was describing it too, and I was a little bit of a blank stare.
You guys are missing out.
Apparently, we're missing a lot over here in the U.S., but we just don't know it, so we're just blindly happy. Tim says, my good friend Friar Lucas Misko is a Dominican friar in Poland. Here's a link to his Facebook page. I'd like to help out. He's a pastor of my church when I lived in Salt Lake City. And we're all getting involved in helping. And I agree with you, Sophie. You mentioned something before about it feels sometimes like we're not doing enough. But I really appreciate you elevating the conversation. I'm going to ask you a little bit about social media. Here we are on social media. This is not real media. This is social media. But what have you seen the role being played by kind of social media through this crisis and raising awareness? I mean, is that part of the uniqueness of this situation?
Yes. So social media has been raising awareness. There's been a huge amount of information shared. There've been, I think also for me, we were talking about the difference between the response this time to, compared with Syria. There are a lot of our corporate clients are in Ukraine in a way that I haven't experienced before, actually, also. And I think that's true for a lot of people in the legal community. So we've seen an amazing amount of resources come together there.
100% agree. And I think, both for visibility and awareness of really the to-the-minute developments in, in the new rules being issued out, or what the circumstances are in one country versus another, and what is likely to come from a country's decisions as it relates to this crisis. I think that that's been a massive facet of just how this works. Yeah. But then also, and I think touching on Sophie's point, the ability for the average person elsewhere to help has been booned by this social media presence as well. And I think, I'll use an example because I know she's in the audience right now, but Jenny just circulated around with a group of us a great way via Airbnb to help directly help out Ukrainian nationals who maybe are, in a tough pinch. And so, all of that awareness that comes from actual abilities for, you can no longer hold up your hands and say, well, I'm just little old me and I can't do anything to help out. And I think a big function of that is social media and its place here.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the, so I don't think it's, how do I want to say this? So the team at Envoy instantly, as soon as this happened, instantly said, what can we do? We want to do, and they're very busy. They're very, very busy. They're working very hard, but they said, we want to do assessments for our clients for free. We can't charge money for this, and they said we want to give something. What's the company going to do? So Envoy is donated. We're donating legal fees, and we're matching legal fees for Ukrainian nationals to relevant charitable organizations, but I love the fact that Envoy is doing that and did it so quickly, but I love even more the fact that our team, it was the team who said it immediately, and I think that's that type of action. People are shy to share that kind of thing on social media because it seems a bit show-offy, maybe, like I donated to this, maybe, but actually I think it's very powerful and important that people do that because it's helpful.
I agree. I think it's important that people do support, and I think it's important that they say that they're supporting because, some people say, oh, this stuff is performative, and that, oh, look at me, look how great I am, right? But it also inspires other people to get involved. And it's like, well, if Joe's doing something, then I should do something too, right? And so I think sometimes we underestimate our influence within our community and our ability to get people to do the right thing, Exactly. And so somebody told me once, it's not fundraising, it's friend raising. And if you can convince a friend to give, and if we all convince a friend to give, what is the power of that? So I think it's really interesting. I thought, what was interesting, actually, I saw the Airbnb thing. I have mixed feelings about it, because I don't know necessarily who's on the other end of this. And also, if I know that I can just create a unit in Kiev and somebody's going to give me money and I know that I'm never going to have to fill that reservation, what's to stop me from just creating a unit in Kiev? So I mean, and I hate to be a pessimist, but I hate to be a pessimist, but I mean, this is the thought that came across my mind. But I also found it interesting. I'd never seen this before. You can donate directly to the Ukrainian government. Yeah. And
that can be difficult for a corporate, for a company to do. It can be difficult for a company to donate directly to governments, but it's something that individuals can do. I think sharing on social media, what I'm not a huge fan of is people changing their profile picture to a Ukrainian flag and, doing and then not doing anything else. I don't think that's helpful at all. But I think changing your profile picture to a picture of the Ukrainian flag and also donating your time or money or expertise is extremely helpful. And just looking at some of the things. So I also saw earlier, just today, Inigo Lopez, who works at Bicortex Languages, there's a picture of him on LinkedIn loading up a camper van to drive. He's getting in his car and driving over with a bunch of supplies.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I'd love to hear. Throw it in the comments. You're watching this right now. We got a bunch of people on LinkedIn right now. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know, what have you seen? What are some of the more impressive contributions or inspiring contributions that you've seen or things that you've done? I'd love to know. I mean, just as we kind of crowdsource information, let's crowdsource opportunities to help. I do know that the Ukrainian government is also accepting Bitcoin contributions as well, which is really interesting. So any of you Bitcoin millionaires out there, go ahead and throw some Bitcoin in there. Naran is also educating me in the meantime that if I want to learn about Eurovision, she said, "Oh no, Ben and Valerie, if you want to know if Will Ferrell's doing it, then I guess it must be worth checking out." Richard doesn't know where he is or what time it is because Love and Relo is on 3 hours early today. He's having some really good conversations with the corporate housing service department industry around how they're helping. Apartmentservice.de are helping accommodate in Berlin. Yes, the amount of help and assistance I've seen from the corporate housing industry, the service accommodation, service department industry is incredible. Hundreds of units being made available to refugees coming over. It's been really incredible, and that's by for every company. I mean, I say hundreds of units. I mean, for each company I know of that are doing, I mean, they're making hundreds of units available, but there are only so many, right? And you're putting multiple families in units. I mean, at this point, it's really an emergency. So whatever goes. Ben, lots of accommodations are required. There are refugees needing emergency accommodation, but also service apartments being booked. For sure. Ben Sukia is shouting out Indigo Lopez. Very cool. Yeah. Throw a link in there, Ben, as well. Shana Indigo as well. Rich saying flags are fine. Sometimes it feels like all I can do offer more. No, Richard, if you're putting a flag on there, you got to pay money.
You don't have to pay money, but you have to do something. Like do something small. Yeah. I really think so.
Very interesting. I want to ask from an employer standpoint, as we're talking about doing things, what can employers do to respond to this unfolding crisis? If they have operations or employees impacted, I mean, what do you do?
So obviously, I mean, there's impact and there's impact, right? So if you have employees in Ukraine, you need to try to help them move out of Ukraine or support them while they stay trying to do their jobs in a almost impossible situation. So there's that. But for employers like us, for example, we don't have colleagues in Ukraine, but we do have Ukrainian colleagues, and we have other colleagues who are extremely emotionally affected. Then I think you have to, I think you have to listen. You have to show that you're trying to do something.
I think the approach is, if you know somebody that's in Ukraine, or if you do have operations that are in Ukraine, it's just about proactivity. At the end of the day, making sure you might be the last person on their mind as folks are scrambling and trying to get out, but you could end up being somebody that's extremely helpful and a great resource for somebody because you were thinking of them, right? But it takes us to reach out. It takes us to take that first step. And I think as an employer, if you do have operations in Ukraine, it really has everything to do with trying to get your arms around the situation from a data perspective and know which people are doing what, who's staying with their family, who is not staying with their family. What can you do to support people that have dependents that are crossing the border while the male or the principal has to stay in that situation? Or as if you're an employer, like Sophy was saying, like us, where we maybe, know some folks in Ukraine, but don't have actual operations there, then it's about still that proactive approach and getting in touch, seeing what kind of resources we can offer. And also just having those company-wide initiatives where if we do want to support a cause, if we do want to support something happening in Ukraine one way or the other, you want to get you want to put those avenues for employees and for colleagues in place so that, those donations can come through and those efforts can be made. So it really comes down to proactivity for me and not counting on somebody else to get in contact with you and really just, trying to step up there.
And just taking the time, and giving people the flexibility. Yeah. That's what you got to do.
Natalie's, thank you, Natalie. I appreciate you. And then our friend Antonio Lamb.
Speaking of the devil there.
It says, for individuals and even small businesses, we can always donate, however small, to organizations such as the Disasters Emergency Committee. Thank you, Antonio.
Exactly. If you're going to put a flag on your profile, I don't want to go on about it, but, even if you donate a $5, it makes a difference. It really makes a difference. And who among us can say that we really couldn't afford £1 or $2 or $1 or $2, So, yeah.
And if everybody's thinking that way, then it really adds up.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to say, here's one that won't cost you anything. Here's a way to support. The biggest sanction we can levy against Russia is oil, fuel, gas, petrol, perhaps you call it.
Apart from Eurovision.
apart from Eurovision? Well, Eurovision is obviously a big number one. Number two is fuel, and really it's their biggest export that, you know. And then I mean, it's frankly the only thing the United States really, I mean, not the only thing, but the biggest thing we buy by far. And I think a lot of politicians were hesitant to support oil sanctions because they were afraid of rising gas prices, and what the pain at the pump is something we hear over here, right? And you know, I looked at the math. So right now, gas prices here in the United States are $4.17. It's the highest prices that we've ever had. Of course, now if you adjust for inflation, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Inflation's been pretty crazy anyway. So to convert that, Sophie, for you, it's $1.10 a liter in the U.S. Now you're probably saying to me, that sounds really cheap, right? Because over there in the UK, and to put this in perspective for my American friends right now, the UK is currently enduring $2.01 US dollar per liter, which is $7 US dollar and 61 cents per gallon, to give you an idea, because we're talking gallons over here. So while we're paying $4.17, they're paying $7.61 USD for gas per gallon over there. And I want to put that in perspective for my American friends here, to say the biggest thing I think we can do, besides giving money, besides kicking them off of Eurovision, is to support higher gas prices. I know it sounds terrible and maybe an unpopular belief, but we have to let our politicians know that we are comfortable paying a little more at the pump and paying a little bit more for goods and services also, because that's going to happen too, in order to really send a message to Russia that this is unacceptable. And it's something you can do, that everybody can do, I think, easily. So I just want to put that in perspective and know that it's really the least we can do, and it's far less even than our European and UK counterparts are doing right now to support. So that's my soapbox.
Well, it's interesting to know that Sophie here is paying San Francisco gas prices. back in the
I paid £1.70 the other day because I stopped in the motorway services. And 5 minutes later, I saw a petrol station that had it £1.50. So
oh, see, right on time.
Christian Hall, that's what they're paying in California right now, for sure. Yeah. And CA in the United States, CA is not Canada, it's California. Richard says there are so many issues spinning around, but related from the crisis in Ukraine itself through to shortages of wheat, inflation in the first world, but potential famine in the third world, through to desperate dive to replace fuel sources, and then the impact on mental health and the Eurovision, of course. Very interesting. You know, we're coming upon an hour here of wall-to-wall Ukraine coverage and global mobility. I wanted to give you each an opportunity, maybe just to leave us with a final thought as we prepare to sign off. Brendan and then Sophie. Brendan, would you like to give us a final word?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, from my perspective, one of the most eye-opening things about this, you know, from our vantage point in being in the immigration service provision business, is that, you know, just how all of a sudden important and human your job can be, despite the fact that you've been doing the same job for decades, right? For a number of years.
Well,
not you, Sophie, me, of course. But no, really, you know, we've spoken with the team about this at length because of some of the emotional tolls that it's taken in dealing with some of these circumstances day to day. And the thing that really starts to hit home is that it almost feels, it becomes a calling. It becomes a more human based business, and one that should be human at all times, right? Yeah. But when the circumstances sort of call for it, like they do here, all of a sudden that really rings true, and that really brings it back home that what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is actually really shaping and impacting lives. And the circumstances are different over the course of time, but this scenario over the course of the last few weeks, I think has really brought that home for a lot of people throughout our industry. And it's actually almost raises a sense of pride, I think, amongst people on the team, that we have the ability to be a part of a solution or of the help that ends up, you know, being something that makes or breaks essentially some people's lives, right? And so being able to have that refresher and being able to be a part of something that is meant to help and alleviate problems that are very, very real and very human in nature. You know, that's kind of what it's all about in this business. And, you know, that's what we're happy to help do. And that's the calling.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Sophie.
So I think that we should all be very proud of how our colleagues in the industry and how some of our governments, not all of our governments, how some of our governments have responded so fast. And I would just say right now, I don't know what day we're on, day 12, 13, something, something like that. It's all pretty exciting and it's all pretty new and everyone's leaping into action. But we are in it for the long term. This is going to last a long, long time. And so I think we have to, the word of kind of caution, I guess I would want to offer up is we're going to be in this for a long time and it's going to be impacting us and our colleagues and our friends for a very long time. So we have to not let it fall out of our minds. When it falls off the front pages, it's still going to be there in our lives. So that's what I'd say to everyone.
It's a great reminder. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Sophie. And thank you, Brendan from Envoy Global today for being here and discussing these issues in the Ukraine and how it pertains to immigration and global mobility. Thank you to all of you in the audience for getting involved and getting active in the comments with your input and your links. If you have other links, please share them and your wonderful questions. We would not have a show without you. Also, thank you for joining us here today for this very important discussion about the Ukraine. I will see you all next week and have a wonderful, safe weekend. Take care, everyone.